Hello, and welcome to this introduction to making and using clipping paths in Photoshop and InDesign. My name is Jackie, and I'll be your instructor for this tutorial. We're going to start off in InDesign, where I have been working on a book cover design. You can see that I have my image placed where I'd like it, but I think it would look better clipped out. To open this image in Photoshop, I'm just going to hold down the Option key and double-click my mouse. There are other ways to do this, but if Photoshop is your default image application, this way is the fastest. Now that I have this open in Photoshop, you can see that my image is still in the default RGB color setup. I'm using this image for print, not digital design, so I will change it to CMYK before I do anything else. Before I start clipping with the pen tool, I'm going to make a new path. Once that's set up, I can grab my pen tool and start clipping. If you've never used the pen tool before, don't worry. It does take some practice to develop and refine your pen tool skills. One thing you may notice here is that I have my toolbar set up to the left, but I'm actually using my keyboard to toggle between the tools. I'm using the Z key for zoom, the H key for the hand tool, the P key for the pen tool, and the A key for the white arrow, which is also called the direct selection tool. The zoom function is very important when you're making a clipping path. If you can zoom in your image, it allows you to be more precise with your path. This will give you nice, clean edges on your final clipped image. I'm going to zoom in a little more. You can see as I'm working that I'm tracing the image just inside the outermost edge. This will give me a clean cutoff with no white background showing up with the snowman's arm. I am using the scroll wheel on my mouse to move around, but I can also use the H key on the keyboard to bring up the hand tool. This is very handy, pun intended, for moving horizontally across the screen, since the wheel only allows me to scroll vertically. There are several ways of working with clipping paths. Some people prefer to make the path in its entirety, then go back with the direct selection tool and refine it. My technique involves correcting any issues as they arise. The drawback with this method is that sometimes I lose my place. You can see that even though the path is blue, it does blend in with the stick I'm clipping. To find where I left off, you'll see me switch to the direct selection tool and then back to the pen tool. When the little asterisk to the right of the pen tool changes to an open circle, then I know that I've found the point of the path that I was looking for. Wow, that little tiny stick had a lot of detail, didn't it? Now I can finally move on to the rest of the snowman. Just as I did with the stick, I will clip the rest of him just within the edge. As you can see, there's a lot of fuzziness or softness to the edge of his hat and scarf. Clipping just within the edge will make my finished project much neater. Let's move on to our guinea pig. From my experience, hair and fur can be one of the most difficult things to clip. Fortunately though, this guy isn't too fuzzy, but I will still go back, delete some of my points, and I'll clip out a few of his hairs. After I go around the guinea pig, I'll clip around this little bottom snowbank and back to where I started to close the path. After I close my path, I'll save it as a clipping path under the Paths box menu. I'll add something like 0.5 to the flatness and click OK. Now I'm going to show you an alternate method to making a traditional clipping path and why it is not always the quickest or best way to clip your image. I'm going up to the Select menu and I click Subject. This will use Photoshop's cool artificial intelligence feature to select what it perceives as the subject of the photo. You will see that most of our guinea pig and snowman have been selected, but there's a big chunk of the snowman that's not selected. Just for demonstration, I'm going to go back over to the Paths box menu and make this a work path. Let's zoom in and look at this path. We already know I will already need to go back and clip the section of the snowman that it missed. But look at this. Do you see how there's a jagged edge and a lot of unnecessary pen points? Now let's toggle back to the first path I made. See how much smoother it is? Once we're back in InDesign, I'll show you how your path can make or break your final design. I'll save this second path so I can demonstrate that in a moment. Let's go back to InDesign. Now, since I saved path 1 as a clipping path, it will automatically clip out when I open my document. You can see that the background is now gone. It looks pretty good, but I don't want the bottom of the picture to have a hard edge. I will go to the Object menu and click on Effects. What I need is a directional feather to blend the bottom hard edge into the white background. That looks better. The white background looks okay, but what if we want to add a little color? I'm going to sample some blue for my image with the eyedropper. That's a little dark. After lightening that color a bit, I've decided it's not working, so I'm just going to use a tint of cyan. I like that. Let's zoom in and look at my clipping path. Yeah, that looks good. I'm just going to adjust the size a little so that the hats aren't covering so much of my headline, just enough to add some visual interest. Remember that alternate clipping path I made earlier? I want to show you what that would look like for comparison. This is how to change paths in InDesign, or turn on a path that you didn't make into a clipping path in Photoshop. I go to Object and Clipping Path and Options. I select our path 2. And now we see not only the path is cut off, but if I zoom in, you can see how rough and jagged that path is. It's just not going to print very nicely against this background. So I'm going to change it back to my first path. Now let's try something different with the background. I'm going to make a gradient with cyan and white instead of the muted cyan. The default gradient is black and white, and that's not going to work. So I'll change the black to cyan and change the direction of the gradient. There, I think that looks great. This concludes my clipping tutorial. I hope you found it both informative and helpful. Happy designing!